more, and there we go. And I have been coming to Erace since June of 2007. Okay, Eracism is the slogan of the group. It's not starting out well. Racism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we are committed to treating all people with love, respect, empathy, compassion, and humility. Join us. Okay. We acknowledge that what we know as the United States is the traditional territory of indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named. Members of our group today are on the lands of Atonkawan, Ripon, Apache, and Comanche in Austin, the Chitimacha and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Lenape and Piscataway in Maryland, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc people in Boston, and the Kahui, and Mojave in Riverside County, California. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through generations. And it's cut off. So we thank their ancestors.
And through today.
And hope that what?
It says, and we thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generations and through today. We need to protect and honor the history and people of these places. Despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, we should always remember that we are all still on indigenous land, and it will always be indigenous land.
Well, you'll have to send that to me because
I'm going to send it. I'm going to send a new package to everybody.
Okay, it's cut off. It just goes through generations. Okay, so all right. The next thing is that everyone is going to introduce themselves, and I will call on you in the order that I see you on the screen. So we will start with Marva.
Good morning. My name is Marva. I've been coming to Erace post Katrina. And look forward to engaging with everyone that's on the screen today.
Thank you. Marion. You had it, Marion. There you go.
All right, okay. Good morning, Happy New Year, everybody. I'm here in New Orleans in the Gentilly area. I've been attending the Erace discussion since June of 1993. And I'm very glad to see everyone. I hope everybody has gotten off to a good New Year's start.
Thank you. Phyllis?
Good morning, I'm Phyllis. I've been coming to Erace since 2008, and I'm in New Orleans.
Thank you. Nora?
Good morning, everybody. I'm in Austin, and it's been about a year now that I've been attending, and glad to be here.
Thank you. Stanton?
Good morning, Stanton, Austin. Almost, I think, 10 months now that I've been attending.
Okay, thank you. Leonetta?
Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. I've been a member of Erace since I was an intern in college.
Okay, thank you. Louise?
Hi, I've been coming to Erace for over a couple of decades, first in New Orleans, now in Austin. Hi.
Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Happy New Year, everybody. I'm Michelle. I'm also in Austin, and I've been coming to Erace since the summer of 2020. And I'm only going to be here for a little while this morning. Unfortunately, I've got to go move my daughter out of her apartment in San Antonio. So I'm just going to be listening today. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Larry.
Good morning, I'm Larry. I've been attending race since about 1995. Good to see everybody again in this joyful new year.
Thank you. Okay, Cindy, it still says that you're connecting to audio. It's maybe you can get your audio because it's not coming through. It's like you're muted. All right, so we'll come back to
I'm
you.
gonna go see if I can help Cindy. I'll be
All
right
right, well, Bill, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Cindy and I'm married to Cindy, her for the audio. I think we've been coming since 2017 or 2016. It was 2 or 3 years before the pandemic when we were meeting at the church. I'm glad to be here, and I'm just go help Cindy with her audio.
Okay, thank you. Pedro?
Yeah, good morning. Happy New Year. I'm a little under the weather, but have been attending Erace. I think this is my 3rd year. So anyhow, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Teresa?
Hi, Happy New Year. I'm Teresa and I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Thank you. Glenn?
Glenn Abdullah from New Orleans, Louisiana. Peace be unto everyone.
Thank you. And Amal?
Good morning. Happy New Year to everybody. I hope y'all had a good holiday season.
Oh, great, thank you so much. Let me explain the format. We ask that everyone keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. We keep a list. We go in order of the list. You raise one finger, wave it around so that I can see it. 2 fingers if you would like to ask a clarifying question of the speaker, which I did not understand what you meant by, or could you further explain what you meant by? Okay, and only 2 questions can be asked of each individual speaker. We respect the speaker. We do not interrupt. We do not have side comments, no personal attacks, no name calling. The point of the discussion is to listen and learn and not to argue. I already explained the clarifying questions. Then at the end, we will have around 11:10 or so, depends on how many people are here. And then if you haven't spoken throughout the meeting, you can take your full 2 minutes, but the wrap up is 1 minute to give your final thoughts. Okay. At any time, if there's too much crosstalk, we call point of order. That means everyone stops talking because there has been a violation of the guidelines. Okay. The reason that I brought this, or I brought the video and whatnot, while I'm at work, I tend to listen pretty much to WWL radio all day long. It always, and for those of you who are in Austin who are not familiar with WWL, it's a talk radio show. Okay, they have 3 personalities that come on in the morning. 2 of them are kind of moderate. One is extremely conservative. But it always provides a great conversation for anybody who's in the office, whatever they're talking about. But there's one particular personality that comes on in the afternoon, and I'm sure Glenn is very familiar with who I'm talking about. And he talks a lot about the crime in New Orleans. And he's always saying the crime, but it is true that the crime is pretty much being committed by teenagers, youngsters, anywhere from the most recent one was a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old that were going around breaking in windows and whatnot. But he's very, to me, harsh on, well, the parents are responsible, all right, for their children. But the point to me is why you don't understand that the parents, and I've seen this many times, are at work. Why are they at work? Because they can't make a living on $7.25 an hour. Cannot in any way, shape, or form live on $7.25 an hour. You can't live on $10 an hour. Okay. So they have to work their day job. They get off in the afternoon and they go to their night job where they work from 5 to 10. So in the meantime, since there are no facilities in the city or recreational facilities for these children to be at while the parents at work, and childhood is child care is at a crisis in this country. Either it's too expensive, they don't have extended hours. Okay, these children are running around unsupervised. And what are they doing? They're breaking in houses, they're having sex. That's another one of his issues. Babies having babies, but why are babies having babies? Because they're unsupervised. I mean, what do you think they're home doing? Studying? No, they're not. So I just feel like he does not understand the challenges that Black people in America face when it comes to just normal everyday living. So sometimes I have to turn him off because he really just, you don't understand what you're talking about. Okay, yes, these things are true, but you're not looking under the surface to see why these things are happening. So that's why I brought this article with this. I watched a series of articles or little videos or snippets of, one was about a young woman whose father had passed away. She was biracial. She was very angry with her dad because she felt like her dad was very racist, didn't understand her circumstances. She did not speak very highly of him at his funeral. But then it went on to this article, which also she's disappointed, she's angry, she's frustrated with the dad, and he's like, well, what are you talking about? And I just wanted some more commentary or discussion about this particular, do people really understand what it is like and things that people of color in this country really experience and go through? So anyway, that's why I brought it. And the list is open. Teresa. You have to unmute.
I'm sorry, when you said Teresa, I thought you were like reading the list of people who were gonna, like, I didn't know I was starting, sorry. Yeah, when I read, sorry, when I listened to this or watched this video, the thing that I would say offended me the most about the father was when he asked, how long am I going to be punished for the choices my ancestors made? And I just, any of those cop outs of I'm above being racist or whatever, because, that was in the past and now the slaves are free. And even people who said, oh, we've had a Black president, so we're post-racial, and just all of the I'm going to put myself outside of or above or not see. And he even admitted, at least in the same episode, that he tells racist jokes. I was like, what are you channeling your ancestors? No, that's you making a choice. And the situation is not going to get better for him personally. if he thinks he is simply the victim, and I love, I always love when white supremacists think they're the victims. Anyway, he's the victim of being accused of what his ancestors, I don't know if he actually is a descendant of enslavers, but he really seems to think that the only conversation that's taken place is that he's being blamed for what has happened in the past and not his contributions, especially with, I didn't understand if he adopted this, if he adopted his daughter, if this is his biological daughter. Either way, it's the only difference I thought was, if this is his biological daughter, it's just, how can you not think that your daughter is at least as good as you are? I mean, half her genes are yours. If it's his adopted daughter, then I can absolutely believe that he's got white saviorism going on. So I'm not clear from that episode what's the case. Did the alarm go off? It seems like I've been ranting for 2
No.
minutes. Okay. I know sometimes I can't hear it, but that was really my point. I'm glad I can get that off my chest. Is just, he feels like he's removed from, and it's just dawning on him, oh, I contribute to racist perpetuation of thought.
Louise. Okay, thank you. We have Louise next. Does anyone else want to get on the list?
You can put me on the list.
Glenn
And Cindy.
and, okay, there's
Cindy.
Cindy and then Bill. Okay. All right, Louise.
I just basically want to jump off of what Teresa said. That, yeah, that was like, that's the thing though with racism, systemic racism. That's the whole point. All white people, well, let's say most white people now are like, yes, slavery was in the past. What, it's nothing to do with me now. And, we're all fine. And they just don't understand. They're completely ignorant as to the systems set in place from then until now and still continuing, and that they are all part of it and all benefiting from it and perpetuating it in many ways. So yeah, I mean, just wanted to add to that yes, it's when he said that, it was just another like, oh god, here we go, same old, and I thought it was weird as well, like he adopted her, right? And did he
I
not
don't
even
really know.
of the problems that might cause, or the difficulties it will be for him maybe, and not being able to give her what she needs? And did we see the mum? Was there a mother involved? I don't know, it was all a bit confusing as to their relationships and how it all came about.
Okay, thank you. Let me clarify. There are more than one of these videos with the daughter and the dad. And at some point you do see the mother. She's adopted. So it was a white couple that adopted this biracial daughter. Okay, the circumstances of how they adopted her, that I don't know. But there is more than one video that shows the two of them. and also with the mother. And so I clarify that, okay, that the daughter is adopted. Okay, thank you, Louise. Next we have Glenn.
Well, it's hard for white people to understand the soul of an African American. Some of the things that even the African Americans don't understand why they do what they do. Some of it is gene memory, not up in the conscious mind, so it'd be difficult, even an African from Africa, to understand what we've been through, and be able to relate to us in the way that they're they're not so clueless. Even the people on this panel here, they don't understand it. You know, I mean, y'all not racist, but y'all don't understand the soul of the African American, the white people on here, and so that's I know my 2 minutes is about up, so I'm gonna
You
leave it
got
at that.
53 seconds.
I got 53 seconds.
Mhm.
Okay, well, also that let's look at the 50s, when the age in which I was being raised. They didn't have the crime. Crime was not on the board for us. All these pregnancies were not there. So what happened? What changed? That's what we ought to look at, and stop really blaming everybody outside of us for that. But we had to change, and how we were raising children that led to what we have now, the disease, the problems that we have now. I'll leave it at that.
There you go. You're right on time. Okay, next we have Cindy and then Bill. Is there anyone else that would like to be on the list? Teresa. All right, Cindy.
Hello, everybody. I taught in a school that was 90% Black and then one that was about half for many, many years. The awareness among the parents varied tremendously, of course, they're people. But the sensitivity that's required to interact across social class and race, as well as age, and whatever economic backgrounds, is tremendous. So that this father doesn't get it doesn't really surprise me. I'm sorry there's not more sociology or psychology involved in adoptions, especially complicated ones that are cross race or with handicapping conditions or whatever else the complications are. Because that dad sure should have gone into this knowing he was going to run into this. Somebody to talk with them, like the race counselor. I never heard of a race counselor until I read this article or saw this video. Interesting. It's a complicated issue. The lack of self-awareness on the part of the dad was scary. But he might have been, who knows what profession, but a male businessman in his what, 60s, early 60s, is not going to be as tuned in as perhaps other people. I think most of us here are more tuned in than he was to what might come up. It's still complicated, even if you pay a lot of attention to it. So we're dealing with big issues. I regret that there's not more support for families. Like, why not a school have a counselor who does? Like the race counselor, I'm not sure I'd call her a race counselor. There are certainly a lot of issues about race that need to be dealt with, especially in a city like New Orleans, where there's a large percentage of other, Black, white, Asian, whatever.
Cindy, would you like to get back on the list?
Not now, later. Thank you.
Okay, Teresa has a clarifying question.
Yes, ma'am.
Cindy, I like your idea. How would you implement that without triggering the no CRT parents?
I don't know that it's possible.
Okay.
Critical race theory, I have not studied. I can't believe that my background is in elementary schools. I can't believe that anyone thinks it's appropriate for elementary schools, maybe high schools, but I'm not even sure about that. I don't know of anywhere that's doing CRT in schools. I may just be outdated.
No, it's graduate level, but
okay, there's no crosstalk.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Bill and then Teresa. Larry, would anyone else like to be on the list? You know, I do realize that this is a difficult or kind of sensitive Phyllis topic, but I'm sure everyone has an opinion. Okay, Bill and Pedro.
I just want to say, Cindy, from conversation with Cindy, she introduces age-appropriate discussions of race in kindergarten on day one. So she conducts racial discussions on race in kin color in her class, but not at the level of CRT, at the level of kindergarten speech. But I wanted to say, Cindy and I saw a wonderful exhibit at NOMA about Black photographers and the role of Black photographers in projecting Black identity. And they said, this was in the early 1900s, they said that Black families would come to the photographer dressed in fine suits and fashionable dresses because they wanted to dispel the imagery of white racists and project a dignity. And I don't think this guy could have handled talking to an intellectual Black man or woman with a PhD or an MD dressed in a nice suit or nice dress. I don't think he could have handled it, given his level of it. I assume his level of education and status, and he couldn't have handled a Black person who was more educated than him. It just struck me, but I highly recommend this exhibit. Anyone in New Orleans, tomorrow's the last day. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Right on time. Teresa.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that CRT is not taught in public school. It's taught at a graduate level course, but it's being used as an umbrella and a scare tactic. So that's why I brought that up. I also wanted to thank you for clarifying that this was an adopted daughter, because I think this parent went into it thinking, well, as long as I'm a loving parent, that's all that matters. And it's not all that matters, especially when the child that you are adopting comes from a very different background and demographic than you. So I think probably from the little snippet that I got, this guy didn't originally see himself as racist, especially when he adopted his daughter, and may have even thought, well, how can I be racist? I've got this biracial daughter. That's often a illogical excuse that's used. But I'm thinking, now that I know that she's not his biological daughter, I am thinking that he went into this completely blind and absolutely broadsided by the fact that whiteness is not the experience or even the standard to which we should all be measured, but unfortunately it does happen. So I hope he has at least a Black friend who can explain that to him. I doubt it, but I don't know. Maybe through his biracial daughter, we do seek out the parents or the things, qualities, and other people that we wish we had at home or something. So I don't know. If he's still alive, then he still has potential for understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Right on time. Larry.
Yeah, it's good that this one father came to his senses, and I'm glad to see that. Some people are trying to hold was the Dallas Cowboys owner, responsible for something he did at 14 years old, being in a crowd. People do grow. People do change. But if this man came to his senses, you know, is it going to make a difference? We are supposed to be a group with one-on-one personal relationships, but does it really change the dynamics of racism in America? You know, Jesus said, greater love has no man than this, that a man would lay down his life for his friend. So once we come into an awareness of racism, are we really willing to sacrifice what it takes to help dismantle it? You know, Martin Luther King, you know, as it relates to violence, Martin Luther King, before he gave his famous speech on Vietnam in 1968, was talking with a group of Black young men involved in violence and crime. I think it was in Chicago. And as he was talking to them, one of them yelled out, "What about Vietnam?" And that changed Martin Luther King's whole perspective. He said here he was talking about crime among Blacks, but his own nation was the greatest purveyor, I think he said, of violence in the world. So a lot of times we start at the bottom, and we might talk about, you know, Tyrone and Leroy in the hood and the things they did, which is bad. But I was looking at a sort of a debate between Michael Eric Dyson and Judge Joe Brown. And one of the first questions that was asked was that on crime and violence.
Larry, would you like to get back on the list?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you. Okay, next we have Phyllis. We have Phyllis, Pedro, Greer, and then Larry. Would anyone else like to be on the list? Amal and Leonetta. Okay. Okay, Phyllis.
Well, I just want to say when I watched this that I would call this man's parenting of this child as psychologically abusive. If you adopt a child of any other culture, you have a responsibility to learn about that culture, find people who can help that child understand the culture they come from and the culture they will be perceived as belonging to, whether they're raised by two white parents or not. And, you know, to make racist jokes and all the things, to not really empower her as a young, you know, biracial Black woman is abusive. And I don't know if in any of the other videos he was called out about that by the daughter or anyone, but I found that really troubling and disturbing of the effect it would have on her psyche to be raised by a man like that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. Cindy, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. All right, so then we have Pedro, Greer, Larry, Amal, and Leonetta. Pedro?
Yeah, there was a remark that always triggers my interest that Glenn made earlier, talking about the soul of a Black person, or what a Black person would experience growing up in our culture, or I guess in any culture or whatever, and the experience of being Black in a racist culture certainly cannot be adequately expressed by a white person such as me that has not experienced it. But Malcolm X certainly expressed his understanding in a very profound way in his autobiography and in other places. And it was really striking to me when he talked about how, you know, Blacks are acculturated, at least for him, in such a way as to deny their Blackness and try to assimilate towards being white, and the whole conking of your hair. I mean, this whole idea of self-inflicting pain, you know, with lie and all of this is so antithetical to, the biological law of nature, that you don't self-inflict harm. It just points to, just the alienation of our species being, it seems to me, that can happen in a culture. Culture kills, culture does all these things. So when I think of critical race theory, it seems like that's the only lens that really seeks to include these things as people try to struggle to understand this alienation, so we can deconstruct it. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense, and that's all I got.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Greer.
I'm not really shocked at his attitude, because if you think about it, he's raised in a world where it's white male dominated. He's raised to think the world is his, and anything that he says has to be wisdom or jewels that fall from his lips. And I'm gonna go back to Loving versus whatever state they were. I think it was Virginia. It wasn't about the woman wanting to be married to a white man. What that case was about a white man wanting his rights, like every other white man, to marry who he wanted to. And again, that's a white man's world. I put in the chat, it's a documentary called A Little White Lie, about a young lady who was raised by 2 white Jewish parents, but come to find out that her mother cheated on her father. So this man thought this child was his, and she's looking at herself growing up and noticing that she doesn't look like her parents. The father had no idea that she wasn't his child, and how when she went to college, they assigned her to the Black student group where she went to law school at Georgetown, and how she lived in 2 worlds because the mom wouldn't admit to what happened. And the dad believed that he was her child, and how that altered their relationship. But this is a great documentary because people don't realize the choices they make go beyond them. And I have a friend who sort of went through something like that, and it's really detrimental until their adulthood, because that person's like my age now, and they still have issues with this. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. Okay, next we have, well, the next on the list is Larry, Amal, Leonetta, and Louise. Anyone else and Beatrice? Okay, thank you. Larry?
Okay, I think I left off by making references to sort of a debate that I saw between Professor Michael Eric Dyson and Judge Joe Brown. And the moderator was addressing the issue of crime and gangs and things of that type in the Black community. And Michael Eric Dyson said the usual, what I might say liberal stuff, like poverty and jobs and things of that type. But Joe Brown responded by one word. He said character. And character is something that we don't talk about. I mean, I grew up naturally in the projects in Jacksonville, Florida. We didn't know what poverty was because it was just common in our circle. Never stepped outside of poverty, but we didn't do the stuff that's done now. 11 and 12-year-olds going around carjacking, and we just didn't do that, But normally when we talk about this stuff, it's always focused on young Black kids. But what about the character that transform white criminals? That this cryptocurrency guy, that's a lack of character. That's about greed. What about the character that shapes capitalism in America? You know, the character that steps on poverty and don't care whether poor people have health care. Those things are important too, but we always talk about the people at the bottom of the totem pole. It's almost like when the Palestinians respond to what Israel has done, we focus on what the Palestinians are doing and not what Israel did to them and is done to them. So, you know, we sometimes miss the whole boat. And why does the racism still exist today? Why it won't go away? Because we're operating on the one drop rule. I think everybody's familiar with that. The one drop rule, that if you got one drop of black blood, I don't care how many generations you go back, you classified as black. Why are you classified as black? Because one drop of black blood would mess up would mess up whiteness and take away from white supremacy. So you can't be a part of us because you got one drop of black blood.
Larry, you don't want to get back on the list?
I'll wait. Thank
You
you.
wait. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Amal is next.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, when I was watching this article, I actually thought that this young lady was his biological daughter. I didn't know that she was adopted by him. One of the things that's interesting, I think a lot of times we got to consider is that when white people in this society operate on a lens of there's no racism doesn't exist, that this is a non-racial society. We got rid of that stuff a long time ago. We a better society than what we used to be. So when they adopt transracially and they bring these black children into their homes, they raise them under that same lens that racism doesn't exist. So I don't have to teach this child about what they could potentially experience in this society that is racist, because after all, that stuff doesn't exist. We got rid of it a long time ago. Not realizing how that attitude affects the child that has to go out into the world and experience these things that you as a white person don't have to experience every day. And so that's the dilemma here. I do commend the man for at least be willing to sit down and listen and have a conversation, because some white people just shy away from the conversation of race altogether because they just don't want to have to deal with it. So at least he was willing to sit down and listen. Now, the racial jokes and the nonchalant attitude, like it's not that serious. He need to work on that, because I think that he wasn't taking the conversation as serious as the daughter was. When I can't remember the lady name who was kind of like the mediator between them two, but when she asked the question for him to describe himself, and he said, "I'm white, I'm male," and I think he said, "I'm 60" or something to that effect.
Amal, would you like to get back on the list?
No, it's okay. I made my point. I was just going further. That's all. It's okay.
Okay, all right. Well, Larry, I have you. All right. We have Leonetta, Louise, Beatrice, Glenn, and Larry. Anyone else like to be on the list? Okay, next we have Leonetta.
Yes, I belong to an organization called the National Association of Black Social Workers. And one of our tenets is that we are against biracial adoptions. And for the reason that some people have mentioned, that raising a Black child in America, the child there's certain things that children learn in a Black home that they would not learn in a mixed race home. That you've know of the talk that most children get when they're about 10 or 11 years old, especially Black males get in the home. And in a biracial home, a mixed race home, that talk will not happen. And that child goes out into America, out into the world, not armed and not with the knowledge of how to survive in a racist society like America is. I have been worried about the children I've been worried about the children that these movie stars have adopted. It would look like it was a thing for them to adopt Black children. And I've always worried how these children are going to grow up in these homes with these movie stars, and how they're going to function when they become 14, 15, 16 years old. I've always worried about that, and I hope that they be okay. Some of the things that I'm talking about that I'm worried about is, do y'all remember those kids that were fighting in a mall, and when the police came, they went after the Black child, when the white one was the one that started the fight, but the police went after the Black child and put handcuffs on him, not even knowing what had happened. Those are the kind of things that children will get taught in a Black home. Not saying that the white parents won't do this, but this is something that Black children are taught at home.
Larry has a clarifying question. Yes, your time was up, but Larry has a.
And who has a?
Larry has a clarifying.
Okay, go ahead.
Lynetta, if your group is more or less against biracial adoption, would the group also be against biracial marriage, since kids would be a natural outcome?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Louise. Louise?
Sorry, yeah, I got
There
you.
you
I'm
go.
zoning out. I'm so sorry. So actually, to jump off again what Leonetta said about the talk, watching that Meghan and Harry documentary, and she opened up about her childhood, and she has a white father and a Black mother. The mother raised her, but she said, which was really interesting, that she never really had the talk, and she is very light-skinned. I mean, very light-skinned. So I just thought that was interesting. I learned quite a bit in that documentary, actually, about England, even though that's where I'm from. But so that was an interesting point. And I think, Leonetta, as far as those stars adopting children of a different race, I don't think, we need to worry about them too much, because their life is weird anyway. It's not going to be like a regular life. So I'm sure they'll always have some kind of coverage. It's like, I think it's the regular mixed race kids maybe that you'd need to worry about. My co-worker, actually, another teacher that I work with, has adopted a long time ago, 2 Black children, a boy and a girl. And she's a very cool lady. She's raising them single-handed too. She has no male or other partner in her life. And even little things like, she would say she would have to go to lessons to learn how to do Black hair, how to wash or to braid or how to do whatever. There's just little things that she didn't really think about, but she's learning a lot, and she's doing quite well, I think. I mean, they're fantastic young people. They go to the school that I work at. Anywho, I think that was all I was going to say for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Louise. Next we have Beatrice.
Like Amal, I really congratulate this father from at least sitting down, recognizing that there's an issue. Same concerns with Phyllis, that you are not, if he is not aware that racist jokes or tropes or whatever it is said or used in front of his child are detrimental, he really needs a lot of awakening. But I thought his question of how long am I responsible for what I've inherited is a key one, because European Americans will fall back on that. I didn't own any slaves. I didn't know any slaves. My people, no one was enslaved that I knew, that was years ago. I'm not responsible. I think that is a question that many would have in their heads, whether or not they ask it. But her response was so telling. She said, until your daughter, and then she began to name all of the issues that concern the ancestors of those of us whose ancestors were enslaved, all of the the duty, the heavy burden that is pressed upon our people as a result of having been enslaved and all that has happened. She did a good job, I think, of pointing it out. And finally, I thought, she said, you commit to an active practice daily to help that your child is seen as someone deeper than the color of her skin. I thought there was a really a daily practice, that the kind of racism, the institutional racism, the structural racism that is pervasive in this country is not something that can be overcome in a minute, in a conversation. And it's a life, it's a lifetime practice, a daily practice of work. And just as it is a daily issue for African Americans to have to deal with microaggressions and the history of structural racism, it is a daily responsibility, I think, for European Americans to do the same. And I thought this, and just to be called a race educator is really powerful. I'm glad, I think it was Seattle, I'm glad that such is occurring, and I'm glad this man went there. I hope that he and his daughter will continue that work, and I glory in her strength as a young woman to come forward and speak her truth.
Thank you, Beatrice.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we have Glenn.
Yes, well, I can't blame white folks all the way for the way that they think. It's how you raise. It's the culture that you live in that creates this. A white child is born to a culture where these things are visible in stereotyping. African Americans been stereotyped, and and sometimes people like Obama come along and the stereotypes get broken. He was great psychology for breaking some of the stereotypes that that white folks had of us, and also stereotypes that they had of Muhammad Ali. He changed the country a lot. Also, the stereotype they had of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all these people broke the stereotype that they had, and that caused a lot of the white folks to change. So it's yeah. I remember in the 70s, since I was armed with knowledge in the 70s, I used to the white folks I worked with, they ain't never met nobody like me who could speak to them the way I spoke to them and look them straight in the eye when I spoke to them. And the logic I used on them, they just wasn't accustomed to that. They had an idea that that African Americans were unintelligent, they were spooky, they were frightful white folks. So they've been stereotyped by the society that they were raised in. I got any time left?
No.
All right.
Sorry.
Good.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Larry is next.
I think a pivotal question is the father asking, how long will white America be blamed for racism? And I think that's the old proverbial $64,000 question, and is it about blame? How long will Black people be blamed for whatever they're blamed for? I think, again, the bottom line is character. Character could cause all of us to grow beyond our circumstances. Character could bring about forgiveness where forgiveness is required. Character would bring about confession of sin and admittance of past deeds, that slavery was a sin, not only against Black folk and the Africans, but slavery was a sin against God. And until, I think, even the white church that supported slavery And even to this day, the white church has so much influence over its parishioners that even if just the white church would get together and make a grand public confession that sin was wrong, it was evil, it was against God, and it is the cause of everything that we're experiencing in America. That hasn't been done. I mean, the Republicans are taking over Congress. What's on the agenda? Hunter Biden? Come on, give me a break. Hunter Biden, they're going to investigate him. You know, immigration, that's good. The deficit, that's good. But they're not going to touch the insurrection and the attitude that's going to lead to a future insurrection, because the insurrection supports their white supremacist attitudes. So they're going to keep on jumping on the least of these. Thank you.
Right on time. Thank you, Larry. Greer.
We had a member who was a white male, and a lot of comments that he said sort of threw me off, being that he wanted to become a parent and he was in a biracial marriage. I'm not going to say a name. And a lot of things, well, he would say, well, that was a mistake. Like if the cops is coming to pull you over and you reach for your wallet or something and they shoot you, he said, well, that could have been a horrible mistake. And I'm just looking at him and I'm like, a mistake? He was like, well, that happened to me once, yada, yada. And I'm thinking this man was trying to have kids, which he did. And I told him at one of the meetings, I would like to be a fly on the wall when somebody calls your child a nigger. I didn't say N-word, that's what I said. But I said, because that person's gonna look just like you. Because of the security that you're gonna give them, that's not gonna be about the real world. And someone said recently, I can't remember who said it, about, you know, these kids live in a higher socioeconomic bracket when they're raised by stars. Yeah, they do, but there's still some dangers with that. You got Charlene Theron, she's dressing her son in dresses. I'm just saying. You have Steven Spielberg's daughter. He has a biracial daughter who he sent away to boarding school, who was sexually groomed and molested the whole time she was there. Now she's an adult entertainment star, AKA porn star. It's a very precarious situation when you put children in a spot to where the adults don't truly protect them from everything that's out there. And money doesn't protect you. Because think about it, she's at this rich, prestigious boarding school, and she was zeroed in on, most likely because of her genetic makeup.
Okay, Greer, do you want to get back on the list? Because we're coming actually towards the end of it. We could probably finish in a wrap up.
Okay, well, you know, I'll do the wrap up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next is Bill.
I think, I don't know, just based on the video, this is a guess on my part, but I think some whites adopt children of color as missionaries to save them. And I think that's the absolute wrong attitude, because you don't want to save children from their own culture. And I know Kamala Harris's mother was South Asian, but she raised her daughter was a product of a marriage with a Afro-Caribbean man, and she raised her daughters to be Black, even though she wasn't Black. And that greatly enhanced Kamala Harris's perspective on life, and she went to Howard University. But and I also remember the mayor of New York, de Blasio, who was a white man married to a black woman, and he talked about how he had to have the conversation with his biracial son about how not to get killed by the police. This is the son of the mayor of New York. So I think there were some situations where white parents understand, at least to the extent that they can, the need to preserve the identity of their children, whether adopted or from a biracial marriage. But a lot of whites, I'm afraid, adopt children of color to convert them to be white and ignore their ancestry and where they came from. And that would result in a lot of confusion for the child.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, we have Phyllis and then Louise. Okay, and then we'll go to the wrap up, starting with the people that haven't spoken at all. So next is Phyllis.
Well, first I want to say that adoption in this country is a for-profit industry. And I believe that children of color are cheaper to adopt. So take that into consideration. Also, I wanted to say this, became aware just this week that the actor from England, Benedict Cumberbatch, his family enslaved people in the Bahamas. And when England ruled out the transatlantic slave trade, they had to free the people they'd enslaved, but they also, the Cumberbatch family, got reparations for losing their property. And there's a call now for his family to pay the descendants of the people that he enslaved. So that, you know, is just came to mind when the celebrity conversation came up. And yeah, I think people raised in very wealthy and especially celebrity cultures, that's already problematic because that can cause a lot of mental health issues. It's not necessarily always a healthy environment. And it's like a big bubble, and then the bubble's going to burst someday. So just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Louise.
So actually, Phyllis, that was something that I touched on a little bit by saying I learned a lot from the past few documentaries that I've been watching. You know, thinking England had a better history as far as enslaved Africans is concerned, but you know, obviously not. And it's not just Cumberbatch's family. Any slaveholder was compensated for their loss of property. You know, it's anyway, that blows your mind. But that's so what Larry said, and when you said you were being raised and it was very different, you didn't get into trouble or, you know, have those options or whatever. I think our society has completely changed in those years. And I hate to say it, you know, we've just lost empathy. The kids are more instant gratification. There's no empathy is lost. There's way less empathy within kids. They need, you know, they're entitled, I think, they're lazy. And that leads them to perhaps crime, because crime is a very lazy way of getting money, you know, and so that happens a lot. Plus they have no guidance. As you said, people are working hard, or as someone said, you know, 2 jobs. I mean, it's impossible to really keep an eye on your kids at that age. And I see it even at school, you know, where I work with the kids, elementary kids. And when a kid would open the door for you or keep the door open for you or pick up something that you've dropped and give it to you, I feel like, wow, you know, it's like a huge deal. It's like, thank you so much. That is so, you know, that should be just a natural thing, saying pleases and thank yous, you know, and we don't have that. It's all self-absorbed. stuff. And as I said, get rich quick schemes, which is probably, or more than likely, you know, some kind of crime driven thing. And I just want to say, where I worked in New Orleans, one of the jobs was the after school program with Nord, the city. And that time of crime for kids is just after school to 7 o'clock. That's the time that the crime happens. And that's the time that the after school programs would take place. And we would take these kids out and do outdoor activities with them and canoeing and stuff. So we probably stopped a lot of kids getting into trouble there. And after school programs are where we should be putting our money, basically. Thanks.
Louise, Glenn has a clarifying question for you.
Yeah, either her or Louise, both of them brought up about Humberback, an actor giving back some reparations. But what about the African Americans who owned slaves in Louisiana? At least about 3,000 of them fought to keep their slaves. What about them giving back reparations? Blacks, African Americans giving back reparations.
Well, maybe so. I mean, anyone who owns slaves. Hold on a minute. I think you're getting confused. They were given money by the government because they lost their chattel, as it were. Right? I don't understand what you're asking me.
Are you asking, should African Americans who own slaves have to pay reparations?
Right.
I think that's two different questions, though, really.
But I mean, yes, in an ideal world, maybe, but this was happening right then, there and then, in those years, you know, centuries ago, a couple of centuries ago, when they were released, and the government gave them money for it. So that money shouldn't be given to them because that property was not theirs to be paid for. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's a slightly different thing, perhaps, and I'm confused.
Okay. Thank you, Louise and Glenn. We are going to move to the wrap up, and we are going to, it's 11:08. And we are going to start with the people who have not spoken. And you have the full 2 minutes if you choose, and you can also pass if you choose. So we're going to start with Marva.
I found this discussion enlightening. All I have to say is thank you for your input. Okay. Have a nice weekend.
All right, thank you. Next we have Marion.
I got up a couple of times. You all may have seen me do this. I wanted to ask my granddaughters, I guess, permission to share this with you. You all may have seen her pass the screen. She's a young woman now, but here's a picture of her with her mother and her youngest sister. She's biracial, and she identifies as Black. She said, yeah, I'm biracial, but I'm Black. She said, I've lived all my life among Black people. My family is Black. I'm a grandmother, her maternal grandmother. So she said, I consider myself Black. Sometimes when we're together, a couple of people have actually asked who she was, the cheekiness of people. I say, this is my granddaughter. And in New Orleans, that's not that extraordinary, considering our history. My paternal grandfather is also biracial. So it's in the family. And to me, it's no big deal because all of us are related, whether you want to admit it or not. We're all related. So the man in this article that we read, this video that we looked at, just needs to have a heart-to-heart with his daughter be honest, don't sugarcoat. It's unfortunate, you all have heard me say this before, if we could just get to the point where we understand that the skin color is superficial, you get to the heart of the matter, it's the character, it's your inner soul that's important. All this stuff is superficial. We're all human. When we were talking about homosexuality, I was saying people who are of the same gender and that love each other. It's not a giraffe and a human being or a kangaroo and a human being, it's two human beings. So in our families, if we have people who don't look like us, they're still our blood, they're still our family, and we love them.
Okay.
That's
Thank
all
you.
that matters. Just love them and be truthful with them.
Thank you, Marion. Okay.
Very welcome.
Stanton.
Setting aside this particular father-daughter relationship, bad parenting is bad parenting. And if this guy had adopted a biracial daughter and is racist, there's something really wrong going on with this guy's mind, is all I can say. There's much deeper issues, in my opinion, than just his racism. Marion brought up gay. As you all know, I am gay. There are millions and millions of parents of gay children who treat their gay children horribly, who psychologically abuse them, who've thrown them out of the house, who've tried to convert them, just all kinds of abuses, especially, in the years gone by in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So again, I think there is a lot of instances of bad parenting out there. Parents who don't understand their children. I don't know that it necessarily has to do with the race of the child or the race of the parents. I think that there are just a lot of messed up people. And I know this is a group about racism, but sometimes I think we get so focused in on just that aspect of the world. And I'm not saying it's not important. It is important. And I'm not a person of color, so I don't have the same experience as people of color. But again, I like what Marion just said. On a human level, we're all the same. And I know that we can't necessarily easily transcend that, but I think that's the goal, is to transcend our individual backgrounds and our individual perspectives and understand that there's a broader perspective and a much bigger story to learn about who we are as a species. So thank you for saying what you said, Marion. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Stanton. Okay, and then Nora.
So I feel like I needed to see more episodes of the counseling session to get a real fuller picture of the dynamics, but I wasn't all that impressed with the counselor and the question about his identities and what he would give up or let go of. I just thought, that's a stupid question, and kind of remind me of Barbara Walters and her famous question of what kind of a tree would you like to be, when she asked it at one of her celebrity interviews. And and then to Cindy's comment about him being not very tuned in to the situation, and I just thought, well, being tuned in might require some action, and that would be maybe too much for him to consider. And that's all.
All right, well, thank you, Nora. So now we'll move on to a wrap up from the people who have already spoken. And so it means you have 1 minute to give your final thoughts. And so we'll start with Larry.
Okay. No, Louise, I didn't say we didn't get in trouble. In fact, we did. Sometimes lots of trouble. I got in trouble as a juvenile. But still, with our meager resources and our meager earnings, we still had character. We went to all Black schools with all Black teachers who were able to relate to our various experiences. Things are different now. We've legalized marijuana, and everybody walking around high. We wonder what's going on. Why is there so much crime? And yes, Marion, love is the answer, but sometimes love is like a two-edged sword. And sometimes when we're discussing sensitive issues, sometimes we have to say things in love that might be a little bit uncomfortable, not mean, but sometimes uncomfortable and take us out of our comfort zones. So thank you very much. Good article, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Cindy.
Quick comments. Anyone who thinks that racism doesn't exist is blind, or they just don't want to know, because it's pretty obvious. Second point, the one drop rule dominates is very confusing in this city because of the amount of blending over centuries. And I actually think it's beautiful. I love the shades and the amount of reddish or golden in with the brown and the white. It's lovely. Third point, how long is this going to last? And I think the answer is as long as racism exists, we will have to actively work against it, even if it's a question of commenting to a neighbor. Last point, the active practice daily is, I think, the key. First of all, active, it's involved. It's not just blindly sitting back watching it all happen. And that it's a practice, which means it's not finished. It's ongoing. You have to do it every day. And it's not a done deal until the racism is gone, which may never happen. It was a good article. I thought it was valuable.
Thank you. Thank you. Pedro.
Yeah, as always, interesting discussion. Thank you for that. Just real quick, I think when Reverend Larry talks about how important character is, of course it's important, but I think what we also need to remember, and what CRT I think starts to address or gets us to start thinking, is the power of culture and the way it can influence and sometimes even compel us to act in anti-character ways in order to get, economic advantages. We act sometimes in anti-character ways that infringe the benefits of others. So there are two concepts that are very connected, and I think just focusing on the character side without appreciating the alienated culture in which it occurs may keep us trapped in a certain way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Teresa.
Thanks. There was one moment in the video where he, again, badly jokes with his daughter, oh, what's it like to be a Black woman or something? And she told him to shut up. And I just think in general, if he just learned to listen more, he will know throughout the rest of his life what's it like to be a Black woman, because everything she tells him about herself is going to be from that frame. So I hope, if nothing else, he becomes a better listener. And I'm looking forward to the next meeting.
Thank you. Louise.
Larry, I really doubt legalizing weed is the root of all of our problems here. That's probably the least of it, and beneficial for certain things. So anyway, I don't think that, haven't got anything else really to say apart from this was good discussion. I enjoyed it, and I wish everybody well and see you next week.
Thank you, Louise. Leonetta.
Yes, it was Nancy, it was a good article, and I just want to share with everybody in the state of Louisiana that social worker that I had that case would have should have picked up on this racist jokes as this father was having, and probably would have not matched him up with that daughter. But that's what I think must have had happened. They either, I don't know whatever state that was in. I don't think he was fairly vented. I really don't, because if he was, I don't think it would have been a good match. So that's my opinion as a social worker.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Phyllis.
Yeah, I want to say it's not just culture, as Pedro said, that can disrupt character. There are many things. One's political affiliation, one's religion. You would think religion would always promote good character, but we see that it doesn't, because a lot of religions promote a lot of discrimination and oppression against various people. And so this is, not just a racial issue in that case. And I think we all have a lot of work to do to eradicate any kind of belittling or putting down of any other group of people. And it isn't loving to belittle or humiliate other human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis. Beatrice.
I think it said she left. the room.
I couldn't, good conversation, good discussion, documentary helpful. The issue of character, I love the conversation that Larry generated. How does it develop though? What are the influences? When we were coming up, there was the church, there was the school, there was the family. There was not so much impinging upon all of that. That, once your father said something, or your mom, whoever's in the house, that was it. We didn't have, it was a different time. It was a very different time. I think we need to look at social determinants of crime and poverty, or the availability of weapons. There's a lot, it's much more complicated than I think, than when I was coming up. But this is a good conversation. And I'm glad to see that this man is taking steps, small steps though they be, maybe the council wasn't asking good questions, whatever the nature of their interaction was, it was an interaction, it was something. And I think every little something that somebody does that works toward working their interpersonal issues with race is something that's valuable. So it's a great conversation, good to be here. Sorry, my computer's acting so crazy. I had to go on and off, had to go on the telephone, oh Lord. Okay, I'm gonna get a can and a string and just connect it to New Orleans and then.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Beatrice. Glenn.
Well, if you put anybody under certain conditions, it's going to produce a certain kind of person. If Africans would have went to Europe and brought the Europeans back over to Africa as slaves and kept them there for 400 years, took away their language, and give them a black god to worship, and they believe in that black god, and look at the people as gods, as those black people as God, it produced the same thing. You have people who were black figuring that they look like that God, and the other people look far away from that God, so they would look at them as being inferior. So it's psychological. It is psychological why white man, the racist white man, behave the way he behaved. It's that psychological training that he has gone through, and it's going to take teaching knowledge, and not just teaching some kind of generalization. You got to get specific. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, Bill.
Great video, Nancy. We watched it twice. was it raises important issues. I want to follow what Teresa said and second her saying that the role of the parents is to listen to their children. And the role of the parents is help the children achieve their identity, not the parent's identity. And whether it's gay, straight, black, white, whatever. And I had two sets of parents, my own natural parents who raised me to realize my identity, and an aunt and uncle who tried to impose their will on me. So I know the negative aspects of it. And if people adopt children of color, white people, try to impose their whiteness on the children, that's a crime. But if they try to help their children and listen to their children and try to raise them as people of color, proud people of color, that's good. So great article, great video, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Amal.
Yeah, that's excellent video. Like I said, I think that the father, I commend the father for at least being willing to sit down and have this conversation with his daughter. But he's going to have to do more listening than talking, because I think that a lot of times there's these quick rebuttals every time somebody black says something like, well, how long am I going to be held responsible? How long is, no, just shut up and listen. Soak in the information that you're given, and hopefully that'll help you draw the conclusions that you need to draw. But if you, every time somebody black says something to you and it's uncomfortable, your rebuttal, be quiet and listen, and then we can move the conversation forward. But don't be so quick to rebuttal every time somebody black has something to say to you, and particularly your daughter. This is your child. Listen to her, because you'll never understand and know what her experience is if there's these constant rebuttals to every time she tells you something. So, but yeah, great article though.
All right, thank you, Amal. Greer?
I think these parents don't want to move out of their comfort zone. You have to immerse yourself in the world that your children are going to be a part of. Because when you don't, that's tantamount to sending your child in a world full of lions wearing a meat jacket instead of with a sword and shield. The response that they could have gave to this man was what James Baldwin said was, what is it that you want me to reconcile myself to? I was born almost 60 years ago. I'm not going to live another 60 years. You always told me it takes time. It has taken my father's time, my mother's time, my uncle's time, my brother's time, and my sister's time. How much time do you want for your progress? And that statement right there, that quote is still applicable for today. How much time? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. A couple of things that I just wanted to comment on. As far as the celebrities adopting children of color, it seemed like in the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was a very fashionable thing to do. It just seemed celebrity after celebrity. Well, because one did it, another one did. I mean, that was my observation, that it was fashionable at the time to do. I don't know them. I can't ask them. It's what I saw happening. And it just seemed like at that time, you know how there's always a trend and fashion at certain points in time. It just seems like at that point in time, it was a trend and a fashion. There, on a TV show, the series, which I was very good, This Is Us. That was a case of a transracial adoption. And one of the characters, I think they did a pretty good job of showing what it was like to have a child of a different race in the family. And the father began to realize that everything that his Black son needed to know, he couldn't teach him. So he asked someone that he knew to help him. He said, I can't teach him everything that he's going to need to know to go out in the world. And that is what, you know, the part of being a parent. Sometimes there are things that you don't know. There are things that you can't help the child with, even when you are of the same race. You just didn't have that experience. You don't have that knowledge. But as a parent, it is incumbent upon you to, if you can't give your child what they need, you go out and find someone who can. Okay. And this parent did. And also part of the show was he joined a transracial adoption support group. Okay. Understanding that, okay, I experienced some trauma because of this transracial adoption. You know, certain things had happened to him in his past because of it. And he needed to sort this out through a support group, which I thought was very good. Pose. If any of you have watched the show Pose, it is very good. It is about transgender and homosexual individuals living in the late 80s and early 90s during the AIDS epidemic and whatnot, and the archaic ideas that the parents, how they were treated by their parents, a lot of them was very, and it wasn't eye-opening. I mean, I already knew all of this, but to see it played out on television, I thought, was giving the general public an insight into what happened to these individuals. And I thought it was very good. So if you've never watched it, I highly suggest that you do, because it's really good. And the last thing that I wanted to say, there are other videos of this father and daughter, and also the mother is included. But there were also, I found through this, there's a video, it's an hour long. So that's why I didn't pick this one. It was long, but it's called The Other Race. And it is a video about biracial children and what they experience as being biracial children and what their daily life. And I ask them a series of questions, and I think it's like 6 individuals that are part of this discussion. As you know, my grandson is biracial, and I had him watch it, and he found it to be, he and I had a discussion about it afterwards. What did you agree with? What didn't you agree with? What did you experience what have you experienced that they talked about in this video? And, you know, it was very eye-opening for me to listen to his responses and whatnot. So that's another one. If you can find that video, it's also on YouTube. It's called The Other Race. And that's also very interesting. So I guess that brings our discussion to a conclusion. And yeah, we can stop recording.